Thank you so much for making time for us. Firstly, what can we read into the different approaches between these two heads of state, Ramaphosa and Trump, in terms of how they conduct meetings with their counterparts that could either prove to be compatible or detrimental to these talks? Ramaphosa seems to be more of a procedural guy. Let's take our time. And Trump seems to be more results-driven. I want to see differences now. What's your take?
No, I think to put it even much more appropriately and better, President Ramaphosa behaved and conducted himself like a statesman and obeyed and acknowledged the decorum and protocols of the Oval Office as the highest office in the land. And in his engagement, that's what informed his attitude and behavior. On the other hand, unfortunately, as it has become customary, the President of the United States turns the Oval Office into a bully ring where he tries to intimidate and totally disrespect his interlocutors or his guests by throwing a lot of uncontested or unverified accusations against them in order to unsettle them before he tries to extract whatever he wants from them.
Do you still have the concern that the U.S. might attempt to influence South Africa's diplomatic relationships with other nations after what we've seen in terms of yesterday's meeting?
He didn't even have time to go that far. His major concern was to try and justify why he has invited, or the administration has invited, 49 Afrikaners for a special refugee dispensation at the time when they had made the ruling to deal with immigrants in a particular way, and particularly refugees that are currently in the U.S. and those who would be potentially trying to find refuge in that country. And he therefore had to single out the footage that he displayed to prove that, in fact, there were genuine refugees running away from persecution and killings. But unfortunately, he used a very strong term to describe their experiences as genocide. Nothing anywhere close to that. And sought to present information and footage that, in fact, disqualified the whole attempt.
Let's talk about one of the images you speak of that was shown by Trump to support his White Genocide movie script, as I would refer to it. That was about violence against women in the Democratic Republic of Congo, showing white people being buried. Can we expect a retractment from the U.S. president?
Well, that is the unfortunate part of it, and it has become very characteristic that accusations are thrown at people without any fact-checking. And there is no remorse on any apology afterwards. We saw that during the campaign. I don't know how many times there have been all sorts of things said about people, which on fact check, it was discovered that there was no grain of truth in them. This is a very unfortunate character of a man who's supposed to be occupying the highest office in that important country.
Let's go back to this issue. Do you think that Trump is more angry about South Africa's genocide case against Israel in relation to the war on Gaza? Why he claims there's a genocide against white Afrikaners? Because he seems to be punting this thing.
No, once you take up Israel to the ICJ, on genocide, and you are able to, with evidence, prove, in fact, that genocide is being committed against the Palestinians. And more people joining to provide the same evidence to testify that this is a fact. Now, who is the enabler? Without the support militarily and otherwise, politically, including diplomatically, by the United States administrations, Biden before, and Trump in this case, I think it is normal to expect them to feel aggrieved and begin to fear that the finger is being indirectly pointed towards them, because they are the enablers of what is genocide that is committed against the Palestinians in the Middle East, and particularly in Gaza.
The contradiction of Trump welcoming these, in inverted commas, refugees from South Africa, while removing protections for those from other countries who are fleeing real conflict and persecution. Over 800,000 people no longer have protection from deportation from the U.S., from places like Haiti, Cameroon, Afghanistan, and Venezuela. What do you make of this?
Well, these are the questions that people in the United States, citizens of the United States, are asking, including members of Congress, by the way. Just a day before this meeting with our president, the same question was raised with Mark Rubio, who is the Secretary of State in the United States administration, as to why now? Why are they making this preferential treatment to these white Afrikaners from South Africa? Whereas during the struggle against apartheid, with all the atrocities that were committed towards black people, why the same was not extended to them? And he pretended not to know anything about it. And he was told point blank that is precisely what happened. And that today, it is strange that the United States will make an exception on false basis of some genocide that is taking place against a particular group of whites, who the United States have to protect by giving them refugee status. I think this is an issue that he was trying to display to the American public, that indeed there is a justification and a reasonable basis for the administration to extend this particular refugee status to these Afrikaners.
To counter that thought or belief that he has, South Africa, the crime in this country is not politically motivated. A majority of the crimes that are committed are against black people. On the other hand as well, white South Africans, there are only 7% of them in our population, yet they own over 70% of land. Do you think Donald Trump wants to hear this, and will he be willing to listen when he's being corrected in terms of his incorrect stance?
Well, I think it is just a matter of record that whatever attempt was being made to let him see the other side and of the reality of what is happening in South Africa, he simply was not interested. That was very disappointing. He was not interested. Totally unfazed. Even when people from the same community tried to explain to him exactly and precisely what was happening, he was not interested. But because he was speaking to the American audience to justify his actions of making exception to these Afrikaners that they have accepted as refugees, he decided to be tone deaf about it, and persisted in throwing around all those accusations and displaying the footage and pictures that he was banditing around in the course of the meeting.
If you've just joined us on Africa Rise and Shine, we're in conversation with former South African ambassador to the U.S., Welile Nhlapho, talking the meeting between South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa and U.S. President Donald Trump. One of the biggest stories this week, probably going into next week. So, Ambassador, let's talk about U.S. aid cuts, which have put over 8,000 workers in South Africa's national HIV program out of work. What's the best way to address this particular issue?
At the time when I arrived as an ambassador to Washington, the issue was on the agenda. There were serious discussions between us and the American administration, particularly the Department of Health and the Department of Commerce, on AGOA and PEPFAR. We managed to convince them about the need for the continuation of supporting the programs that we have rolled out in order to deal with HIV and AIDS. And I think we succeeded to do that. But all the time, the warning was always there that because we can be able from our own budget to deal with certain aspects of what they were funding, that there will be a time when, in fact, that funding will be reduced or ceased. We then went into an agreement with them on the basis of areas where we thought they could shift some of the funding into areas where we were able to identify the gaps that we could not deal with from our own fiscus. And that became the arrangement on the basis of which we proceeded. On AGOA, it was the same thing. They had warned, even at that time, that at the time of the review of AGOA, there is a possibility that our position or our continued benefiting from tariff-free arrangements under AGOA might cease, because this was a particular dispensation that was designed to assist least developed countries to get their goods tariff-free into the United States, as that we were a middle-income country. And therefore, it will be desirable to consider at a particular stage having a specific trade agreement that will be U.S.-South Africa because of the nature of the trade between the two countries. And therefore, deal with them purely on a bilateral basis while still maintaining aspect of a favored nation status that we still continue to enjoy. That was the position. And I think what the delegation did by presenting to the U.S. administration, particularly the Department of Commerce, a framework within which we can continue with these mutually beneficial trade arrangements that will be suitable for both of us. Because for us, trade and investment is very critical for addressing some of the root causes of the conflicts in our country, and particularly the structural challenges of our economy that fuels some of the social ills that we are trying to deal with, including rampant crime, amongst other things.
What do you see the future of that AGOA agreement being then of 2000?
Well, AGOA agreement is not a bilateral agreement between South Africa and the United States. It is an agreement that has been extended to a select number of countries, not all countries, select number of countries, on the basis of the criterion that has been developed by the U.S. Congress of countries that will then benefit from tariff-free arrangements. And that is what is under review, which would come under review in November. And already, as I am saying, a signal was already given to us in 2007 when I arrived in Washington, that consideration at some point will be made to exclude us on the basis of the size of our economy and the fact that we can be able to enter into a separate bilateral arrangement, which is where I think is the point that we have reached with the reports by our Minister of Trade, Mr. Paksau, on the conversations that they've had with his counterpart and the proposals that they have made to the U.S. administration through the Secretary of Commerce, including, by the way, a possibility of a continuation under AGOA. So the options have been left open and the negotiations will have to continue on the baskets of goods that will have to be subjected to whatever tariffs or any other regime, trade regime that will arrive at, which is mutually beneficial for both countries.
So as much as discussions are open and so are opportunities in terms of AGOA, could this meeting between Ramaphosa and Trump have any negative impacts in terms of those other select countries, those other 31 countries under AGOA?
Well, not necessarily. It will depend on the United States whether they still maintain the same criterion and will continue to invite the same countries or reduce some of them or add more, because they do that at their own discretion. But given the approach that they have taken now, and the manner in which they have been looking at their own domestic priorities above any assistance they would be willing to continue giving in terms of programs that they were financing to many of the developing countries and international organizations that are dealing with humanitarian situations, the chances are that there will be a reduction or a maintenance of that status quo. Let's wait until the Africa-US summit that they are planning to call. It might give us a better signal as to which direction the relationship between Africa and the US will be going and where AGOA will be placed within that context.
After Wednesday's meeting, Ambassador, do you think our President Ramaphosa will in some way edit his objectives going into this meeting of originally preserving strategic partnerships, of course, allaying fears or removing negative sentiments on political narratives around the Afrikaners issue, and advocating for continued support on trade, security, partnership, and democracy? Or do you think these will remain as they are?
I think if you observe how he conducted himself and how he presented the case of our relationship, particularly when it comes to trade and investment, and the mutual beneficiary arrangements that are in place in terms of employment creation by our companies investing in the United States and vice versa. he tried by all means to make the point that we indeed, we do need each other, and that the relationship can be improved, and that whatever other difficulties are in the way of improving those relationships, they should be placed on the table, and we would be prepared to engage those issues.
I don't know if you have a comment or an opinion on the fact that most of these meetings between heads of states and Washington were closed meetings, and this time it was a live streaming meeting. What do you think of that decision at the White House?
No, I think that is his new style of doing things. Whenever guests are being welcomed to the White House, it is customary that there is a press briefing about the purpose of the meeting and questions and answers taken to a selected core of media that constitute the White House press corps. And of course, visiting press accompanying the head of state or head of government that is engaging with the President of the United States. It is common and normal. But from the time of the meeting with the President of the Ukraine, the tone and approach became different. We saw the treatment that President Zelensky got. And in the case of our president, it was a bit toned down. But of course, he did lay an ambush in the fact that he then brought into that room that footage in order to prove a point, as I said earlier. I think it was meant more for the domestic audience, but also to try and put our president on the spot, because we have persistently been saying that there is no such genocide taking place in our country, and that we can be in a position to prove that. So he wanted to embarrass our president by putting up that footage. But unfortunately, I think he was ill-briefed, and the choice of the footage did not assist him very much in getting his point across.
Right. Let's leave it there for now, Ambassador. We really thank you for your time, and I'm sorry to cut you there, but we are completely out of time. Do have a great rest of your Friday and a rested weekend.
Well, today is Africa Day, and I hope I'm going to have a serious reflection on a number of issues that are confronting this continent, and be able to celebrate this day.
Absolutely, and the Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture happening in Tanzania as well. It all comes together. South African ambassador to the U.S., former Welile Nhlapo, joining us. It's 32 minutes past 8. Let's get our news headlines.